Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that may otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Fair use is in full effect. This is for educational purposes only. More rumors of war. Let me get this. Micah 2:2. And they covered fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. Not DJ saying that the Maduro government stole land from them and oil. You can't make this up, people. Isaiah 10:1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away from the right, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. Like we've been saying, Venezuela, tribe by Asher. Let me get one more. Let's just jump over to 14. This for DJ, Babylon the Great. And you wonder why everybody gonna come together and shoot their arrows on this country. Isaiah 14:6. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted, and none hindereth. It's two groups of people. The Amalekites over in Palestine and the Edomites over here in Babylon that's going around wreaking havoc around the world. Psalm 73 in full effect. They are not in trouble as other men. Everything they're accusing Maduro of is what they do. Guess what it is right here? We one day close to the kingdom. Shalom.
Today I spoke with the Secretary General of the United Nations. We spoke for quite a while, and I fully laid out what the escalation of aggressions and threats has been and what happened yesterday and today, when the government of the United States says that they belong to them and that Venezuelans stole the oil from them, meaning that Venezuelan oil belongs to them, that Venezuelan minerals, gold, and all minerals belong to them. And what we had never heard before, that the lands of Venezuela belong to them and we have to return them immediately. It is simply a warmongering and colonialist claim. And we have said it clearly, and now everyone sees the truth. The truth has been revealed. They seek regime change in Venezuela to impose a puppet government that would not last even 47 hours, that would come to hand over the constitution, sovereignty, and all wealth and turn Venezuela into a colony. That simply will never ever happen. Never, never in life. Venezuela will be a colony of nothing, of no one, ever. We are within the law. In addition, international law, as I told Secretary Antonio Guterres, supports us and protects us, because it is illegal under the United Nations Charter and all international agreements to attempt to prevent free naval trade in the seas and oceans of the world. This is not a time for courses, letters of Marco piracy. No. And Venezuela will continue trading all its products in the spirit of the generation of liberators that rose up fighting against the Guipuzcoana Company, Spanish company, and trade will continue back and forth of our oil and all our natural wealth, which by constitution, by decree of Bolivar, our wealth and our land and our oil belong to their only legitimate owner for centuries upon centuries, which is the sovereign people of Venezuela, the absolute owner of the subsoil lands and all their riches. First, good neighborliness among the peoples of Colombia and Venezuela and all of South America. There is a maxim of empires for centuries which is divide and conquer. And how much have they done to divide Colombia from Venezuela every single day? And the greatest guarantee we have of peace, stability, and respect in the world is unity. That is why my call today, 200 years after the approval of the fundamental founding law of Greater Colombia, 206 years after this great idea was founded, this great nation that declared itself a republic in arms and gave complete freedom to South America. I make my renewed call with deep love, as a great Colombian that I feel I am, to the people of Colombia, to their social movements, to their political forces, to the Colombian military that I know very well. I call on them to perfect unity with Venezuela so that no one dares touch the sovereignty of our countries, and to enforce Bolivar's mandate of permanent unity. To have a country as Bolivar dreamed and decreed on several occasions, with its natural resources protected in the hands of the nation. A country with full exercise of its national sovereignty, not dependent on any foreign power, absolutely sovereign in the exercise of all its faculties, in full development of its self-determination as a people, which was a great dream for which thousands of our soldiers gave their lives, and our liberator Simon Bolivar gave his life until the very last second, in Venezuela is a reality. We are a free, sovereign, independent Bolivarian republic, capable of defending itself and exercising its sovereignty under any circumstance.
U.S. going to war with Venezuela? Is the U.S. going to war with Venezuela? And if so, why exactly? Trump has announced a complete blockade of all oil tankers for Venezuela. What do oil tankers have to do with drugs? I thought this was about drugs. Oh, right. Except when Donald Trump ended up pardoning one of the biggest narco traffickers out there, the former Honduran president. So you mean it's not about the drugs? Now we're admitting it's about the oil. This is what Donald Trump had to say. He says, Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before. Until such time as they return to the United States of America, all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us. The illegitimate Maduro regime is using oil from these stolen oil fields to finance themselves, drug terrorism, human trafficking, murder, and kidnapping, for the theft of our assets and many other reasons, including terrorism, drug smuggling, and human trafficking. The Venezuelan regime has been designated a foreign terrorist organization. Therefore, today I'm ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. The illegal aliens and criminals that the Maduro regime has sent into the United States during the weak and inept Biden administration are being returned to Venezuela at a rapid pace. America will not allow criminals, terrorists, or other countries to rob, threaten, or harm our nation, and likewise will not allow a hostile regime to take our oil, land, or any other assets, all of which must be returned to the United States immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. What land exactly is he talking about? Did we ever own Venezuela? Was that ever our land? Did we own them at some point? What about the oil fields that were on their lands? So we did own the oil fields. They did nationalize their oil. They decided to take those oil fields back, very much like how the United States decided to take TikTok back. Well, we not even take it back. It was never ours. It was China's. And the U.S. forced them to basically get rid of it so that we could sell it to Zionists, Israelis. As we said, it was a matter of national security. We need to take TikTok because they're destroying our youth. And what's the difference? Venezuela said we need to take our oil back because we cannot allow foreigners to come into our land and rob our country and basically be the ones profiting off of our natural resources. But the war hawks continue. Here's Representative Andy Ogles saying the Constitution gives President Trump clear authority to defend the United States against invasion. Okay, yes. Is Venezuela invading us? No, not unless we do a regime change and then all the people start flooding in. He also has explicit authority to suppress piracy. Oh, that's funny. That's rich. He's literally pirating right now. The United States is pirating boats that do not belong to us, filled with oil that does not belong to us. But they say he has the explicit authority to suppress piracy. These Venezuelan drug boats are actively committing crimes by trafficking fentanyl into the United States. We know that's not true. No fentanyl comes from Venezuela. It comes from Mexico. From Reagan to Clinton, there is a clear history of using military force against drug traffickers at sea. Their fentanyl kills our citizens. Americans die because of it. President Trump must do what he can to defend Americans. The law and morality are on his side. They think you're stupid. They lie to your face. Are you going to accept that? Are you going to be stupid and and go along with this? We know fentanyl is not coming from Venezuela. We know this. We also know Trump just literally pardoned one of the biggest drug traffickers flooding America with cocaine, a guy who literally bragged about shoving cocaine up the noses of gringos, and he pardoned that guy. So the question you have to ask yourself is, are you stupid or are you not? Because they're betting on you being stupid. Representative Carlos Jimenez tell President Trump it's on that. No, on building another country. Highest bidder, up to those that can put in a lot of money into our political system, those who have a lot of sway. And for a long time, those Cubans have been extremely powerful in our political system. And they have been extremely disruptive and destructive to Cuba and to Latin America in general, to Central and Latin America. And they're, for whatever reason, it's like they're their own type of cartel. And they're actually quite violent because all they want is murder. They want murder of these leaders and the destabilization of these countries. And for what end, I'm not really quite sure, but they haven't been able to win. Unlike Israel, the one
going to support Iran, and those are the kinds of funds that are aid Venezuela in that. But seizing those kinds of oil tankers, and it's undeniable that that's oil that's going to support Iran, and those are the kinds of funds that are used all kinds of illicit things, so terrorism. So for me, it makes a lot of sense, at least by what I've seen.
That guy didn't make any sense at all. I don't even think he formed a cohesive sentence in all of that. But one thing that I did understand really clearly was he kept saying Iran over and over again. He might as well have just thrown in Hamas and Hezbollah. He's clearly doing the bidding of Israel for this, saying, and Israel's all for this regime change. So are we doing it because Israel controls our presidency and the White House and everybody in Congress? Is that why we're doing it? Because Israel wants it? What is the reason? Because Israel claims that, yes, this Venezuelan oil is flooding over to Iran, and Iran is using it to fund all of the terrorism. And Venezuela cut off relations with Israel a long time ago. Israel's still mad about it. And so maybe that's what this has to do with. But this whole notion, going on and saying, oh, they've stolen the land, they've stolen the oil from us. So Donald Trump saying it, yes, they stole U.S. oil assets and that those assets must be returned to the United States. That sounds dramatic. It also sounds like piracy, but that's not actually what happened. First, the basic reality. Venezuela did not sneak into Texas, seize oil rigs, and run off with American property. What Venezuela did twice was nationalize its oil industry. And whether you agree with that or not, nationalization is not theft under international law as long as compensation is paid. And in Venezuela's case, compensation was paid. Now, to understand this, you have to go back to the mid-20th century. By the 1940s, Venezuela's oil industry was almost entirely controlled by foreign companies, mainly American and European giants like Standard Oil, Exxon, Gulf, Royal Dutch Shell. They operated under concession contracts that gave them enormous control over Venezuela's most valuable resource. Then over time, Venezuelan governments started pushing back. And in 1943, they passed a hydrocarbons law forcing oil companies to split profits roughly 50-50 with the state. Now, that alone was considered radical at the time. Then in 1971, Venezuela passed a law of reversion stating that when concessions expired, all assets would automatically revert to the state. That was the warning shot. And after the 1973 oil shock, when oil-producing countries suddenly realized how much leverage they had, Venezuela decided not to wait. On January 1st of 1976, Venezuela formally nationalized its oil industry. Foreign companies were replaced by a new state-owned oil giant, PDVSA. Now, here's the important part. This wasn't a chaotic seizure. This wasn't mobs storming oil fields. It was a legal nationalization passed by Congress, negotiated with companies, and accompanied by compensation. Foreign firms lost control, but they did not walk away empty-handed, very much like TikTok. We forced the sale, but TikTok got a bunch of money. Now, take ExxonMobil as just one example. After Venezuela's later disputes were arbitrated, Exxon received $908 million in 2011, $1.6 billion in 2014, and $77 million in 2023. And Exxon wasn't alone. Other companies were also compensated after nationalization and contract changes. So calling this theft just doesn't line up with the facts. This was resource nationalism, like TikTok, not piracy. And TikTok's even, that's even more controversial because that's not actually